We'd been married 10 years, almost to the day. That kind of thing sneaks up on you a decade. 100 dinners. 1,000 inside jokes. You get comfortable, you assume you know the person beside you. But I've come to realize that sometimes the scariest thing isn't losing someone. It's realizing they were drifting long before you noticed. It all started, or at least unfolded, at her company's quarterly mixer. Megan had been with the same firm for 6 years. Normally, these events were boring formalities I tagged along to, nursing a plastic glass of cheap Chardonnay and making awkward small talk with the few spouses dragged along for show. We'd done this dance before. Walk in together, stick to each other's side, crack a few work-wife jokes, then dip out after an hour. Nothing memorable. But this night felt different before we even got there. She spent longer getting ready than usual, way longer. Normally she threw on a modest blouse, something business casual that said, "I'm here because I have to be." But tonight, she wore a dress I hadn't seen before. Navy blue, tight in the waist, with a slit down the side that showed just a bit more leg than I was used to her showing at these things. She did her makeup carefully, not like she was heading to a meeting, like she was trying to impress someone. I told her she looked nice, and she barely acknowledged it. Just gave me one of those distracted thanks without looking up from the mirror. No smile. No warmth. I didn't push it. The event was held in one of those modern co-working spaces downtown. All exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and kombucha on tap. Loud music, catered sushi, the usual spread of recycled conversations. Megan immediately drifted into the crowd, dragging me toward a circle of her coworkers, all of whom I'd met at least once before. And that's when I noticed him. Eric. He was new. I could tell by how he introduced himself, like someone who wasn't used to repeating the same 3 anecdotes yet. Tall, well-dressed, white button-up with the sleeves casually rolled to his elbows. Confident in that effortless way that tells you he's used to being liked. And Megan? She was glued to him. At first, I chalked it up to friendliness. She'd always been social, more extroverted than me. She was good at making people feel welcome, even when she wasn't really paying attention. But something about the way she stood with him, the way her body tilted toward him like he had gravity, set off alarm bells. Her laugh was louder, her posture softer. It wasn't just attention. It was admiration, deference. And the part that really caught me off guard? She didn't introduce me. I stood there beside her for maybe 5 minutes, awkwardly nodding along to their conversation about a recent pitch meeting, waiting for the usual, "Oh, this is my husband." But it never came. Not even a glance in my direction. It was like I wasn't there. Like I was some intern holding her purse. When Eric finally noticed me standing there and extended a hand, Megan's face twitched with something. Annoyance? Embarrassment? She quickly covered it with a smile, but it was too late. Something was off. Something had already shifted. I tried to let it go. I did. I made polite conversation, asked about his role, complimented the company's recent marketing campaign. Anything to assert that I was part of her life. But I could feel Megan bristling next to me. She kept cutting in, redirecting the conversation, laughing a little too hard at Eric's jokes and barely reacting to mine. I felt like a third wheel standing next to my own wife. After about 20 minutes of this slow-burn humiliation, I leaned in toward her and said, quietly, "Hey, can we talk for a second?" She sighed, loud, theatrical, like a teenager being asked to take out the trash. "In a second," she said, brushing it off. "Eric was just telling me about the Peterson account." I waited another minute, then lightly touched her elbow. "Meg, seriously, just a second." That's when she turned. Hard. With a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, she pulled me just far enough from the group to look like she was humoring me. Then she dropped the smile entirely. "What?" she hissed. "What is your problem tonight?" "My problem," I said, stunned. "You've been ignoring me since we walked in. I've been standing here like a ghost while you flirt with some guy I've never even heard of." She cut me off before I could finish. "Oh my God, are you jealous right now? You've got to be kidding me." Her voice was rising, not loud enough to draw stares, but just enough that I knew she wanted people to hear. "You're doing this? Here? At a work event?" "I'm not jealous," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm confused. I'm trying to understand why you're acting like I don't exist. She let out a short laugh. One of those laughs that's more insult than humor. Maybe because you're exhausted and overreacting? I don't know, maybe take a breath and stop inventing drama where there isn't any. And just like that, the narrative flipped. She wasn't distant, I was insecure. She wasn't being disrespectful, I was imagining things. She wasn't making questionable choices. I was tired, paranoid, needy. I stared at her, stunned, as she turned and walked back toward Eric without waiting for a reply. The rest of the night passed in a daze. I stood by the drinks table, mechanically sipping ginger ale and watching the two of them from across the room. The way she leaned into him when she laughed. The way she touched his shoulder like it was second nature. The way she didn't look in my direction once. Not once. People mingled. Music played. I must have talked to a few people, smiled in all the right ways. But I don't remember any of it. All I remember is the tightening knot in my stomach as the hours dragged on and the woman I married morphed into a stranger right in front of me. At one point, I saw them sneak off together. Not obviously, not in a way that screamed anything. Just a casual, side-by-side exit toward the balcony. She didn't glance back, didn't wave, didn't text. When she finally returned, her lipstick was smudged. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it meant everything. I didn't say a word about it. Not that night. Not on the way home. Not even as we got into bed and she rolled over, already half asleep before I'd even brushed my teeth. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, her back to me. And I felt something I hadn't felt in our entire marriage. Alone. That night changed everything. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was the moment the mask cracked. The first time I truly saw the version of Megan that had been slipping away from me for months. And once you start seeing things clearly, it's hard to go back. I couldn't unfeel what I'd felt that night. Couldn't unhear the way she dismissed me like I was the one creating a problem. But the truth? The truth had been building long before that corporate party. I just didn't want to see it. Maybe that's the most painful part. I chose not to look. I excused too much, dismissed too many gut feelings. I chalk it up to stress, to work, to routine. I thought I was being patient, being a good husband. But now I see that I was just looking the other way while everything we built quietly unraveled. After that night, I started replaying the past few months in my head. Not just once, but obsessively. Like a detective with a case board no one else could see. Patterns started forming. Lines connecting things that never felt connected before. Started small. At first, it was just late nights at the office. That's how it always begins, right? We're swamped. End of quarter. We're launching something big. It all sounded plausible. She's ambitious, driven. I respected that. I didn't want to be the husband who doubted her career moves. But the frequency grew. What was once a rare late night turned into a routine. She started coming home after 9 p.m., sometimes later. And when she did, she barely looked at me. No kiss. No sorry I'm late. Just a distracted shuffle through the door and a muttered, "Long day." Even the way she moved around the house changed, more guarded. Like she didn't want to be noticed, didn't want to engage. She used to sit on the couch with me, legs over my lap, sipping tea while we decompressed from the day. Suddenly, she started going straight to the bedroom, sometimes without eating dinner, locking the door behind her like she needed space. From me, I remember one night in particular. I had made her favorite lemon pepper salmon, roasted garlic potatoes, sautéed spinach. Took me over an hour, even opened a bottle of wine. I lit candles. I was trying. She walked in around 10:15, hair messy, eyeliner smudged, still in her heels. When she saw the table, she blinked like she'd stepped into the wrong house. "Oh," she said flatly, "you didn't have to do all this." I tried to keep the smile on my face, but something in her tone, that mixture of guilt and indifference, hit me hard. "I wanted to," I said. "You've been so busy lately. I thought it'd be nice to just be together." She sat down, picked at the food, barely touched the wine. Told me she was exhausted and that her head was K*ling her. 10 minutes later, she excused herself and went to bed. I ended up eating alone, the candlelight flickering across an empty chair. Then came the shopping. Megan was never materialistic. Not really. But suddenly, she had a revolving door of packages arriving at our door. Expensive brands, flashy designer labels, shoes she'd only wear once and then forget in the back of the closet. I asked her about it once, half-jokingly. "Someone's getting fancy," I said, tapping one of the boxes stacked near the door. She didn't even look up from her phone. "It's just stuff for work." "Didn't know your office had a runway," I replied, teasing. That earned me a glare. "I like to look good. Is that a problem now?" she said sharply. I backed off. Like always, didn't want to escalate. But deep down I wondered, who was she trying to look good for? Because it hadn't been me in a while. Another thing that changed, her phone. We never had a my phone, your phone policy. We respected each other's privacy. But there was trust. She used to leave her phone around the house, screen up, never cared if I picked it up to check the weather or text her mom back. That stopped cold. Suddenly, her phone had a new passcode. She started keeping it on silent, face down, even in the bathroom. If it buzzed and I so much as glanced in its direction, she'd snatch it up like it was evidence in a trial. I asked her once, gently, "Why the new code?" She shrugged. "Work stuff. They're cracking down on security. You know how it is." Maybe that would have been believable if she didn't flinch every time it buzzed. And then, there were the plans we stopped making. It wasn't just the spontaneous stuff, weekend hikes, movie nights, late-night diner runs. It was the future. We talked about a trip to Japan, buying a cabin in Oregon, maybe even trying for a kid in the next year or two. But slowly, those conversations dried up. Anytime I brought up the future, she changed the subject or gave vague non-answers. "Let's just get through this quarter," she'd say. "Then we'll talk." Or worse, "Can we not do this right now?" At some point, I stopped asking. One night, I caught myself scrolling through our texts. I don't even know why. Just habit, maybe. But something hit me, the tone. It was all logistical. "Can you grab milk? I'll be late. Don't wait up. No, I miss you." No heart emojis. No inside jokes. The int asterisk Macy was gone. Our messages looked like two coworkers coordinating a project. Even our bedroom life faded. At first, it was subtle. Longer gaps. "I'm just not in the mood tonight. I'm tired. I have a headache." Totally normal sometimes. But then it turned into weeks. Then a full month. And when we did connect, it felt mechanical, like she was somewhere else. Like she was just going through the motions to keep me from asking questions. I'd lie there afterward, staring at the ceiling while she rolled away from me and fell asleep in seconds. I used to love the quiet moments after, the warmth, the closeness. But lately it felt cold. Hollow. The worst part? She stopped asking about me. About my life. I'd tell her something about work. A new project, a promotion I was quietly hoping for, and she'd give me a distracted, "That's nice." No follow-up. No real interest. Like my life had become background noise to her. I could have told her I was building a rocket ship in the garage and she probably wouldn't have blinked. So I started shrinking, retreating into myself. I stopped bringing up things I cared about because I already knew the outcome. Indifference. I stopped initiating affection. I stopped trying to fix what I couldn't name. But that night at the party, that was the moment the quiet erosion became something loud, something undeniable. Because watching her with Eric wasn't just uncomfortable. It was clarifying. It wasn't a woman slipping. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was someone already emotionally gone, already orbiting someone else, already choosing to live a version of her life that no longer included me. And the scariest part was how easy it had been for her. How natural. Like she'd already practiced this. Like she'd already replaced me. Emotionally, mentally, maybe even physically. I just hadn't caught up yet. I used to think love died in sudden, dramatic moments. But now I know better. Sometimes love dies quietly. In missed glances, in distracted answers, in the slow drift of two lives moving parallel but never intersecting. And sometimes, The person you thought you'd grow old with starts rehearsing their exit long before the door even creaks open. All you can do is wonder when it really started, and how you didn't see it coming. I didn't confront her after the party. Not that night. Not the next morning either. I moved through the following hours like a ghost, functioning just enough to appear normal while something inside me quietly hardened. There was no screaming match, no dramatic accusation. I didn't need answers yet. I needed clarity, and I had a sinking feeling that clarity was coming whether I wanted it or not. The party ended later than I expected. I stayed near the windows overlooking the city, pretending to scroll through my phone while keeping Megan in my peripheral vision. I watched her movements, her choices, the way she navigated the room without ever checking to see where I was. At some point, the music softened, people began saying their goodbyes, and coats were pulled from chairs. That's when I saw it. Eric leaned in and said something to her that made her pause. Not laugh, not smile automatically. Pause. She nodded once, slow and deliberate, then picked up her purse. No announcement, no glance in my direction. She didn't scan the room looking for me. She didn't text. She didn't hesitate. They walked out together, side by side, comfortable, familiar. I stood there, frozen, watching them disappear into the elevator bank. The doors closed, and that was it. 10 years of marriage reduced to the quiet hum of an elevator descending without me. No misunderstanding, no coincidence, no alcohol-fueled confusion. This wasn't impulse. This was intention. I waited a full minute before moving, mostly to be sure I wasn't imagining it. Then I made my way toward the exit, my legs heavy, my chest tight. I passed coworkers who smiled and waved, completely unaware that my entire life had just tilted off its axis. Outside, the night air hit me like a shock. Cold, sharp, real. I saw them again near the curb. Eric opened the door of a rideshare, his hand resting briefly at the small of her back. Megan stepped inside without resistance, without protest, without looking over her shoulder. The door shut. The car pulled away. She never looked back. I stood there long after the taillights disappeared, staring at the empty street like something might rewind itself if I waited long enough. Didn't. The city moved on around me. Cars passed. Laughter drifted from nearby bars. Somewhere, a siren wailed. I reached up and twisted my wedding ring around my finger. Felt heavier than it ever had before. Inside the building, the party was still winding down. Half-empty champagne glasses lined the tables, abandoned and warm. I walked back in slowly, deliberately, as if every step was a decision I was making for myself. I stopped at a tall table near the windows, the same place Megan and I had stood together when we first arrived. I slid the ring off my finger. For a moment, I just held it. The gold caught the light, familiar and suddenly meaningless. I thought about the day I put it on. Her smile. Her hands shaking slightly as she laughed and told me she'd never felt so sure about anything in her life. I placed the ring on the table, right next to 2 untouched champagne flutes. Then I walked out. No confrontation, no scene, no desperate text asking where she was or why she'd done it. I didn't call. I didn't chase. I didn't beg for an explanation that would only insult my intelligence. Whatever Megan was doing that night, she'd chosen it fully. And I wasn't going to compete with someone who had already won her attention. The drive home was quiet. Too quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't open the windows. I just drove, hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead like it was the only thing anchoring me to reality. I expected anger to hit me, or grief, or panic. Instead, I felt something colder. Certainty. When I got home, the apartment was dark and still. Her shoes weren't by the door. Her coat wasn't on the hook. I stood in the entryway for a long time, keys still in my hand, absorbing the silence. For the first time in 10 years, I was truly alone in that space. And I knew, without a single doubt, that whatever happened next wasn't an accident. She hadn't stumbled into betrayal. She had walked into it, eyes open, hand in someone else's, without once looking back to see if I was still standing there. And that realization changed something in me forever. The days after that night blurred together in a way that's hard to describe. Time kept moving, but it no longer felt linear. Mornings arrived whether I was ready or not. Nights dragged on endlessly. I went to work, answered emails, nodded in meetings, completed tasks. From the outside, nothing looked broken. But inside, everything had gone quiet, like a room after the power cuts out. The apartment felt wrong without her. Not empty, foreign. Her things were still there, scattered everywhere like ghosts refusing to leave. Her mug sat in the sink. Her sweater hung over the back of a chair. Her shampoo bottle stood untouched in the shower. Each object felt like an accusation, a reminder that the life I thought I had was still physically present, even if emotionally it had already collapsed. I didn't sleep much. When I did, it was shallow, restless. I'd wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, half expecting to hear the door open or her phone buzz from the nightstand. It never did. She didn't come home that night, or the next, or the one after that. She didn't text. That was the part that surprised me most. No explanation, no excuse, no apology, not even a message pretending concern. It was like she had stepped out of my life entirely and closed the door behind her without bothering to announce it. At first, I thought that silence would destroy me. I thought I'd cave, reach out, demand answers, beg for closure. But something strange happened instead. The longer she stayed silent, the more space opened up inside me. Pain was still there, sharp and persistent, but beneath it grew something steadier. Resolve. I stopped checking my phone. Stopped wondering where she was, who she was with, what version of the story she was telling. I realized none of it mattered anymore. Whatever explanation she could give would be self-serving. Whatever apology she might offer would come too late. She had already shown me the truth with her actions. And actions don't lie. One evening, after another long, quiet day, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the bedroom we once shared. The framed photos on the dresser. The indentation on her side of the mattress. The faint scent of her perfume still clinging to the air. For the first time, I didn't feel sadness. I felt clarity. I understood something then that I hadn't allowed myself to understand before. I wasn't abandoned in a moment of weakness or confusion. I wasn't replaced because I wasn't enough. I was left because she chose an easier path. A path without accountability, without history, without depth. And I refused to chase someone who could discard 10 years so easily. That realization didn't erase the pain, but it reshaped it. The ache in my chest stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like a scar forming. Something healing slowly whether I liked it or not. I began to change my routines. Not dramatically, quietly. I woke up earlier. Went for long walks before work, letting the cold air clear my head. I cleaned the apartment thoroughly, not as an act of erasing her, but as an act of reclaiming space. Every drawer I organized, every shelf I cleared, felt like taking back something that belonged to me. Work became a refuge, not because it distracted me, but because it reminded me of who I was outside of my marriage. Competent, focused, capable. I threw myself into projects I'd been putting off for years. Ideas I'd shelved because they didn't fit into our life. I stayed late not to avoid going home, but because I finally had the mental clarity to build something for myself. There were moments when the pain surged unexpectedly. A song in a grocery store, a couple laughing on the sidewalk, a memory triggered by something insignificant. Those moments hurt, deeply, but they passed. And each time they did, I felt stronger for surviving them without reaching for her. I didn't hate Megan. That surprised me too. Hatred requires attachment. Anger requires energy. What I felt instead was distance. Emotional detachment settling in like frost. She became someone I used to know. Someone who had played a significant role in my life, but no longer defined it. One night, as I sat alone on the balcony watching the city lights flicker below, I finally admitted something to myself. I wasn't going to fight for her. Not because I was defeated, but because I was done competing with someone who had already chosen to leave. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure from her mouth. I didn't need to prove my worth to someone who couldn't recognize it when it was standing right beside her for 10 years. That night, something shifted permanently. I stopped thinking of myself as the man who was left, and started thinking of myself as the man who let go. And in that quiet acceptance, in that decision not to chase, not to beg, not to bargain, I felt the first real sense of control I'd had in months. The emptiness didn't disappear, but it changed shape. And for the first time since that night in the office building, I knew I was moving forward, not away from her, but toward myself. The hardest part wasn't accepting she left. It was accepting what her absence revealed. When Megan walked out of my life, or rather, when she drifted out so casually that I barely noticed until she was gone, she left behind more than silence. She left behind an unfinished version of me. One that had wrapped his life around hers like vines growing up a trellis. Once the structure was gone, I didn't know what direction I was supposed to grow in. I just knew I had to. In the weeks that followed her disappearance, I didn't make any grand declarations. I didn't post inspirational quotes or jump on a plane to find myself. I started smaller. I went back to a project I'd shelved the year before, something I had once been passionate about but had gradually abandoned under the weight of Megan's priorities. It was an app idea, a productivity tool that I'd built the skeleton for during late nights and weekends, only to leave in limbo when Megan rolled her eyes at the time I spent on it. Who's going to use another to-do list app? She'd once said, sipping wine across the kitchen island. Just seems like a waste of time. Back then, her disapproval was enough to make me doubt myself. Now, it fueled me. I dug into the code every night, not because I was chasing success, but because building it made me feel like me again. The version of myself that used to get excited over possibility. The guy who had ideas and followed through on them. The guy who didn't need permission to create something he believed in. Days turned into weeks. I kept my head down and worked. The pain didn't vanish, but it dulled into something manageable. Like a bruise I'd learned not to press on. And somewhere along the way, the project started taking shape. I reached out to an old college friend who'd gone into venture capital. I didn't expect anything, just advice, maybe a few critiques. But he surprised me. "This is good," he said during a Zoom call, eyes scanning the prototype I shared. "Really good. You've got something here." Within a month, he connected me with 2 other investors. By the end of the quarter, I had funding. Not life-changing money, but enough to hire a small team and rent a modest office space downtown. I signed the lease with hands that didn't shake. Not because I wasn't nervous, but because for the first time in a long time I felt capable. There's something strange that happens when your life begins to rebuild. You start noticing color again, flavor, texture. I started listening to music on my commute. I started cooking again. Not just throwing together leftovers, but real meals, the kind I used to take pride in. I started calling friends I hadn't spoken to in months. Not to talk about Megan, just to reconnect. And people noticed. "You seem lighter," one friend said over lunch. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," another told me. But I wasn't doing anything revolutionary. I was just existing without the weight of constantly proving my worth to someone who never seemed to see it. One morning, I arrived at the new office early. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and the city still had that quiet hush before everything kicks into motion. I unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and stood in the middle of the space. Bare walls, a couple of desks, white boards filled with scribbles. It was modest, scrappy, but it was mine. I remember sitting down, sipping my coffee, and realizing I hadn't thought about Megan in days. Not in a bitter way, not with longing. She just hadn't occupied space in my mind. That's when I knew I was healing. And of course, that's when she came back. It started subtly, like a ripple in a calm lake. A message from a mutual acquaintance popped up on LinkedIn. Nothing strange. Just a casual, "Hey, have you been?" Message from someone I hadn't talked to since before everything fell apart. Then it happened again. Different person. Same tone. Too friendly. Too coincidental. "Didn't Megan used to work with you?" I typed back to one of them after a third message pinged. There was a pause. Then the reply, "Yeah. She's been asking about you." I stared at the screen, unsure how to feel. That name, Megan, hadn't crossed my mind in weeks. Seeing it spelled out like that triggered something dull in my chest. Not pain exactly. More like a memory your body remembers before your mind does. I didn't respond. A few days later, I saw her. It was a Sunday morning. I had started frequenting this cafe near the office. Quiet, tucked into a corner of a neighborhood that still had character. I walked in, phone in hand, halfway through replying to an email when I noticed her. Megan, sitting at a corner table, alone, nursing a coffee. She looked up. Our eyes met, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel anything. No adrenaline, no anger, no longing, just a quiet recognition, like bumping into someone you once knew in a different lifetime. She stood slowly, uncertain. Her hair was shorter, her face a little thinner. She looked good but tired. Older somehow, though it hadn't been that long. "Hi," she said, voice soft. I nodded. "Hey." An awkward beat passed. "Didn't know you came here," she added. I looked around. "New favorite." She smiled, tight, brittle. "You look different." I shrugged. "Life's different." She nodded slowly. "I've heard." There it was. Confirmation that the quiet buzz through our old circles had finally reached her. That people were talking. That maybe she was curious. Maybe even regretful. We didn't sit. We didn't hug. We didn't pretend this was anything but a strange, accidental collision of two people who used to be everything to each other. "I should let you go," she said finally. I nodded. "Take care, Megan." She hesitated, like she wanted to say something else, but she didn't. She just gave a small, tired smile and walked past me out the door. I watched her go, and that was it. No second thoughts, no heartache, no temptation to turn around and ask her if she missed me, because I already knew. Whatever she was hoping to find when she started reaching out again, she wasn't going to find it here, because I wasn't the same man who stood in that office building months ago, watching her walk out with someone else. I was someone new now, and that version of me didn't live in the past. We ran into each other one last time. It wasn't planned. She was standing outside a bookstore, alone, holding a coffee like she was waiting for something or someone. When she saw me, her face lit up with a flicker of something that used to be familiar. But this time I didn't feel anything. No tension. No weight. Just a strange calm. We spoke briefly. She mentioned things hadn't worked out with Eric. Said life had been messy lately. I could hear the regret in her voice, but not the kind that wants forgiveness, the kind that wants rescue. I didn't offer any. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said quietly. I nodded. "I know. No bitterness. No need for explanation. Just the silence."